On Saturday, the G7 released a statement announcing that they'd agreed to an exemption for American multinationals from the OECD's new global minimum corporation tax, which aims to force big multinational companies to pay an effective tax rate of at least 15%. Now, obviously, this threatens to upend the entire project, which looks set to be the first genuine effort at international tax cooperation, and to which 137 countries have already signed up. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the global minimum corporation tax, how Trump forced an exemption from the G7, and what happens next. Who's the worst politician right now? Hear our thoughts and argue with us on our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. So the fundamental problem that the OECD's minimum corporation tax is trying to solve is really quite simple. In the modern age, it's very easy for big corporations to move to different countries. This both allows them to avoid paying tax in their country of origin and creates a race to the bottom among states, who have to compete with one another to offer the lowest corporation tax in order to encourage corporations to move in or discourage corporations from moving out. Now, of course, a handful of countries have done very well out of this. We're looking at you, Ireland, by offering super low corporation tax rates and thereby attracting big multinationals that make so much profit that even if they're paying a low rate on those profits, it's still great for the tax havens hosting them. However, for the vast majority of countries, this has meant lower corporation tax revenue and undermined their ability to effectively set corporation tax rates, creating a paradoxical situation where raising corporation tax can actually result in lower revenues and vice versa. Now, this problem has been around for decades, if not centuries. The League of Nations actually discussed the need for coordinated tax policies way back in the 20s, but it's always been difficult to fix. In lots of ways, it's a classic collective action problem. In the aggregate, states would be better off if they cooperated on corporation tax, which would allow them to maximize tax revenues and avoid a revenue-squeezing race to the bottom. But there's always an incentive for would-be tax havens to cheat, knowing that offering a lower tax rate to mobile corporations could make them more money, at least until someone else offered an even lower rate. In 1992, for instance, the Rudling Committee proposed a 30% minimum corporate tax rate for the EU, but nothing really happened. There was then a renewed effort in 2001 when the Commission published a communiqué arguing that intra-EU tax cooperation would both result in higher revenues and help reduce single market frictions. But while a majority of EU member states expressed support for the idea in 2004, the proposal ultimately didn't go anywhere, in large part due to the reluctance of low-tax states like Ireland, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. However, in 2019, the OECD, which today has 38 member countries, including 22 from the EU, began calling for a global minimum tax rate, which was enthusiastically picked up by Germany and France, who came up with a concrete proposal involving a two-pillar system. Pillar 1 is basically intended for massive tech companies and aims to redistribute taxes from tax havens to those countries where they have the most users. And Pillar 2, which basically sets a minimum 15% corporation tax rate for corporations and their subsidiaries, and importantly allows other countries to impose top-up taxes on those corporations if they find a way out of it. So, for example, if Ireland refused to implement the 15% minimum rate, allowing, let's say, Amazon to get away with paying less taxes, other countries could impose higher taxes on Amazon's operations in their country in order to push Amazon's effective rate up to 15%. Now, Pillar 2 has drawn most of the media's attention, and is generally what people are talking about when they refer to the global minimum tax. Now, we should note here that 15% really isn't very high. It's lower than most countries' pre-existing corporation tax rates, and much lower than what many small businesses already pay. Pillar 1 also only applies to multinationals earning over 20 billion euros, and with profitability higher than 10%, while Pillar 2 only applies to multinationals with earnings over 750 million euros, and more specifically is aimed at profit shifting, which is when multinationals send their money between their subsidiaries in different countries to minimize tax payments. Nonetheless, the basic rationale is the same, and the OECD estimated that it will result in about $150 billion in new tax revenues globally. Anyway, in April 2021, the Biden administration gave the proposal the green light, and by the end of the year, 137 countries had signed up to it. While no country has yet implemented Pillar 1, about 40 countries have since implemented Pillar 2. However, Trump's return to the White House put the whole project in jeopardy. On January 20th, Trump issued an executive order announcing that the US had withdrawn from Pillars 1 and 2, and then took things a step further with his One Big Beautiful Bill, which originally included a provision known as Section 899, which meant that if a country tried to impose top-up taxes on an American multinational, the US would impose revenge taxes on individuals and companies from that country operating in the US. This was clearly a hot topic at the recent G7 meeting, when the other 6 members eventually agreed to exempt US companies from the minimum tax rate in exchange for Trump dropping Section 899. This will now be discussed with the OECD, but whatever they say, it's pretty clear that Trump has no intention of signing up, and will threaten any country that tries to impose top-up taxes. Now, this was pretty poor form from the rest of the G7. Not only has this exemption put the entire project at risk, Section 899 probably wasn't going to survive anyway, given that Wall Street opposes it on the grounds that it could undermine both the dollar's reserve status and America's place as the home of international finance. And it doesn't even really seem like a good deal for Trump either. While this exemption might be good news for US multinationals like Meta, Apple, and Alphabet, who are most likely to be affected by this new tax, it's not good news for the US taxpayer. After all, one of the reasons that Biden agreed to sign up to this deal is that, at the moment, American companies use profit shifting to avoid paying taxes in the US too. Many American tech and pharma companies, for instance, currently pay more taxes in Ireland than America, and this global minimum tax rate is supposed to remedy this. Ultimately, this is a pretty depressing outcome for anyone who wants to reassert national sovereignty over multinational corporations, or at least make them pay more tax. After all, this project was decades in the making, intended as a partial solution to a centuries-old problem, and perhaps the only silver lining here, at least for anyone who supports this proposal, is that the UN is currently working on a similar project, although it's hard to imagine Trump signing up to that one either. All of this plays into a broader feeling coming out of America at the moment. At one time, the US seemed to be a steady, stabilizing force in global politics, but it seems that those days are over, with American influence, popularity, and dominance on the decline. So in the next issue of our magazine, Too Long, we're discussing this shift, and the potential that we're currently observing the end of the American order. In that section of the magazine, we unpack everything from the collapse of democratic norms in the US to the decline of American soft power, and if the US can maintain its dominance in energy and technology. We also discuss the people who could pick up the reins from the US, like if China, Europe, or even a new multipolar order could replace America. This magazine is our longest ever, coming in at 76 pages, and it's full of our very best journalism and well thought through analysis. That goes beyond just the US too, with more than half of the magazine dedicated to other topics, from Germany's new focus on military might, the offshoring of migrants around the world, how Nigel Farage could become Britain's next Prime Minister, or our section where we ask a handful of experts what's really driving anti-establishment sentiment around the world. You can pre-order a copy of Too Long from our website right now, or you can subscribe to make sure that you never miss an issue going forward. And if you do, you'll also get 20% off every copy as long as you're subscribed. Plus, just this week, if you use code AmericanOrder, you'll get an additional 20% off any subscription, bringing down the price to as little as £6.40. So pre-order a copy now to get yourself all of that extra content and support the journalism that we do here at TLDR every single day.